Welcome, my friends, to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, and I'm thrilled you're joining me today for a fun conversation with a passionate author. We're kicking off the program, like it's our tradition, with a short reading from the feature book. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. My name is Steve Eoannou, and I am a short story and novelist based in Buffalo, New York. I guess what you should know about me is it took me 30 years to get my first book published. And today I'm going to read a little bit from my third book that's coming out in the fall called Yesteryear. And Yesteryear is about Franz Stryker. And you may not know the man's name, but he was the man who wrote and created The Lone Ranger and The Green Hornet and Sergeant Preston of the Yukon. Those all started on radio. And the part I'm going to read is when I introduce his best friend, John Barrett, who was a radio actor in Buffalo. And he was the original Lone Ranger on that radio premiere 90 years ago this year. And so this is from chapter 2 of Yesteryear. Barrett stood in front of the dead microphone, performing the Covered Wagon Days script. His voice, rich and resonant, boomed across the deserted studio as he delivered his lines. The words rang like struck notes. It was the sonorous voice of a man with broad shoulders, a cleft chin, someone strapping who stood over 6 feet, bootless. Barrett was none of these. He was shorter than most men, with delicate features, pronounced cheekbones, a slender nose, pale, graceful hands that floated when he gestured. Even his mustache was delicate, trimmed precisely like the silver screen actors he idolized. He developed a habit of smoothing the whiskers into place, first the right side and then the left. His hair, the color of Arabian sand, had begun to recede and was pomaded in place. When Barrett entered a restaurant or party, people didn't notice his penciled mustache or retreating hairline or floating hands. They didn't notice him at all until he spoke. Then heads would turn, necks would crane to see who belonged to that voice that bordered between baritone and bass, whose words filled every corner before they pushed at walls, overturned furniture, and demanded to be heard. Surely a voice like that belonged to a talking picture star, a New York Yankee, a hero from the Great War. Barrett had a voice made for radio. So smooth and rich, it was destined to be heard by millions. He was sure of it. Buffalo families huddled around their Crosleys and RCA Victors and Zenith Stratospheres each night, tuned to WEBR to hear him read the news or introduce the next program or star in the comedies and dramas written by Stryker. His voice was his instrument, like Stryker and his typewriter or Artie Shaw with his clarinet. He mastered it, learning to modulate volume and timbre, to color tone, to extract emotions from Stryker's words and send them over airways to the kitchens and living rooms and into the ears of his audience. He tugged tear ducts and pressed passions with mere inflection. His voice made hearts gallop. When he delivered his lines, people would turn to their wooden or bakelite radios and stare as if expecting him to stride from the speaker and perform in front of them. He could voice any role, villain, foil, young, old, but was best when he played the hero, and his wondrous phrasing was matched with his character's remarkable deeds. The taller the tale, the deeper his register. The head turners and neck craners who'd heard him speak at a restaurant or a party would burn with disappointment when they realized that Olympian voice that had seized their attention belonged to a slender whisper of a man sporting a slender whisper of a mustache. They would return to their meals, resume conversations, feeling cheated, as if Barrett had somehow swindled them. Some would scowl or glare, their expression shouting, "How dare he?" He grew sensitive to this and learned to rein his voice in public, to speak softly, to save the full beauty of his vocalizations for the microphone, the way a stallion waits for open fields before running unrestrained. Barrett had no intention of performing the old cover Wagon Days script in front of a lifeless microphone in an empty radio studio on a blustery winter night. He'd gone to the cluttered desk he shared with Stryker, searching for a box of Pine Brothers glycerin throat drops. He worried about sore throats, laryngitis, and somehow damaging his voice. Papers, old scripts, new scripts, half-finished scripts covered the desk like mounded snow. Even Stryker's Remington 16, the same model typewriter he had at home, was buried in radio plays. As Barrett approached the desk, certain he felt a tickle or scratching somewhere between his pharynx and larynx, an indication of an oncoming cold or strep or influenza. Covered Wagon Days, episode number 10, Danger at the Gold Mine, tumbled from the pile and landed at his feet, open to the first page.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm so excited you guys are joining us today. I have an amazing guest. It's going to be such a fun episode. If you are new to the podcast, go ahead and subscribe. You can find it at any of your favorite podcasting station. You don't want to miss an episode. If you're interested in supporting the podcast a little more, go ahead and join the Patreon community. The links in the comments help us to bring more and more authors to the screen for you guys to enjoy. And also you get to see the unedited version of the video, so you don't want to miss out. And because we're all here to see who is our new author for this week, let's get started. Hello, Mr. Stephen. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me today.
It is such a pleasure to have you. I love this reading, and I'm really curious about this book. I need to know, what is it the whole book about, and what made you decide to do it?
Well, this may surprise you, but I got the idea in a bar. At least I think I did. I was at a bar or a party, and someone mentioned to me that the man who wrote The Lone Ranger was from Buffalo, New York, my hometown. And I said, there's no possible way I would know that. I'm a Buffalo writer. This town's very good about promoting creative people from this area, like Joyce Carol Oates or the Google Dows. I would know if the man who wrote The Lone Ranger was from Buffalo. And of course, I Googled it, and he was from Buffalo. And not only was he from Buffalo, but he was from my neighborhood. He went to high school like 2 blocks from where I was living at the time. He wrote The Lone Ranger a few blocks north of me. And I was really interested in that. And then I learned that he sold the rights to The Lone Ranger for $10 before it exploded into this cultural phenomenon. And I said, I got to write about this guy. And so that's where the idea came from.
Okay, you got me at the whole part. He sold the rights to the story before it blew up, and this poor person got nothing.
Yeah. Now, he wasn't a dumb guy.
Okay,
He was
please
a very
walk us.
big-hearted. He was a very big-hearted Buffalo guy. This is during the Depression. He was working at WEBR, local radio station, still on the air today. He had a wife, 2 small children, and he was supporting about a dozen family members who had lost everything in the stock market crash. So he was really under a lot of pressure financially. And the man he sold the rights to, a man named George W. Trendle, who owned WXYZ, a radio station out of Detroit, and Stryker had been contracting the scripts for him for The Lone Ranger for about $7 an episode towards the end. And Trendle knew that The Lone Ranger, he had a good feeling the Ranger was going to take off, and he knew what pressure Stryker was under. So he offered him a full-time position to be the head writer at WXYZ for more money than Stryker had ever made, so he could take care of his family. But the catch was he had to sell the rights for $10. So Stryker was put in a hard position. He had never had a successful radio series beyond local Buffalo radio stations. This was a chance to go national, but more importantly, as a way to take care of his family. No idea the Ranger was going to become this enduring, money-making cash cow 90 years later. So yeah, he sold the rights for $10. And as his son said in his biography, his dad was either part of the worst deal in entertainment history or the best deal in entertainment history, depending if you were a buyer or a seller.
Oh my God, that's one of those stories that you're going, oh, what happened? But
yeah.
Once again, hindsight is 2020. Everybody kind of can look back and be like, you shouldn't have done that. But when you have a family to support,
Yeah.
probably best thing that he could have done to take care of his family at the time.
Yeah. Well, it gets worse.
Oh God, of course
So
it
in
does.
the 1940s, of course, by now the Ranger had been on the radio for 10 years. Stryker had written Ranger novels, comic books, comic strips. There were some movies. All the money was going towards Trendle. And about after World War II, Trendle started claiming in interviews and in articles that it was he, not Stryker, who created the Lone Ranger. And he kept repeating the lie till he died in the early 70s. And Stryker never confronted him. He still worked for Trendle until Trendle sold the rights to the Ranger in 1954 for $3 million, which was a record sale in the entertainment business at that time. And if Stryker was asked by his family or friends, he would say, well, the people in radio, they know me, they know I did it. And if he was asked in articles, he would only say, oh, only God creates, which was kind of a nice way of saying, well, Trendle didn't create it either. So he's a very nice man, a big-hearted guy, very humble, gracious, and never confronted Trumbull. But even today, if you go back and look at that awful Johnny Depp version of the Lone Ranger that came out about 10 years ago, and if you make it to the end, when the credits roll, you'll see based on the characters created by George W. Trendle. It still lives today, that misconception.
You just break my heart. I'm like, oh my God, that is awful.
Yeah. But good stuff for a fiction writer, a novelist, right? We can sink our teeth into that.
When you found the story, you found all this information and all of this madness behind this poor guy. Where do you decide to take the story to? How do you decide to put the story together?
Yeah, the first thing I had to decide is the timeline. Because like I said, Stryker worked for Trendle from 1932 until 1954. They still had that professional relationship. So I decided that I'm a Buffalo-based writer. I wanted to focus in on those weeks where Trendle asked him to come up with a new character, and until it premiered on the radio in WEBR here in Buffalo. So I focused on those weeks here in Buffalo. And the story is about how he got the idea for the Lone Ranger, where the different elements, the tropes that we're all familiar with, the white horse, the silver bullets, the mask, where that all came from. That's in the book. So it's really a fun book. It sounds kind of depressing, but it's really a fun book. It's part noir, it's part comic novel, it's biographical fiction, it is historical fiction with a dash of magical realism thrown in. So it was really a fun book to research and write, and hopefully it's going to be a fun book to read.
You make me feel so much better because I'm going, this just sounds so sad and depressing. But I love the take. I love the fact that you make it into a very fun read and focus on like the highlight of the creation process and all the things that went together. My heart will still hurt for this family because come on now, like it's been 90 years and we're still believing that other people wrote this character and then not even giving the credit where it's due. So I'm glad you wrote it.
Me too. I mean, it was really a fun book. When Stryker, he died, he was only like 60. He died in a car crash, and his estate donated all his papers to the University of Buffalo. So when I was doing my research, I was able to go, and he saved everything. There's like 25 or 30 cartons of everything from his Remington 16 typewriter to original scripts to letters and telegrams back and forth, Lone Ranger memorabilia. So I put on the white gloves, and I've held like the Lone Ranger scripts in my hands from 90 years ago.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's fun.
That's an awesome trip back to history. And the fact that he kept everything, it's amazing to me because I'm going, most of us write a script and then first draft is going in the trash. Like nobody's going back. It's like, I want nobody to look at this. So that is beautiful. How long did it take you to research and put this book together? Because this is a lot of work.
It was start to finish. Gosh, I don't even know. Probably 5 years at least with the research and the writing. And then what happened was my first novel, Rook, came out last October. And so they had to stagger the release dates because they didn't want the two books competing with each other. So that extended the time to publication. So it was at least 5 years of research and revision and writing, and now marketing and promoting the book.
You write short stories as well as novels. How did you switch from one genre to the other? Like, how did you switch gears from I'm going to do short forms that needs to be fast and quick to this long narrative?
I've gotten away. I've been so caught up in writing novels that I haven't written many short stories since Muscle Cars. That was the book, my short story collection that came out. And that's 17 short stories of guys making bad decisions. That's what I tell people, semi-autobiographical. I find that sometimes I get the ideas for short stories out of nowhere. It just seems like I'll remember something that happened and I'll say, oh, I just want to write that down. And then it kind of grows into a short story that I'll keep working on. But they're almost like one-offs at this point. I've really been focusing on the longer form. And growing up, I never wanted to be a short story writer per se. I always wanted to be a novelist. So short stories writing is kind of guilty pleasure now when I get to it.
I'm glad that you're very conscious about what you prefer to write. It's a whole different way of thinking and a different way of plotting a story between the two of them. As a writer who has played in different genres and different mediums, what advice would you give an up-and-coming author who's trying to figure out where should I start?
I would say, think about the books that you like to read and what's that genre? What's that style like? And then think about, okay, what's the book that you really like to read or the movie you'd like to watch, but you can't find it? It hasn't been written yet. I think that's where you start. Write the book that's not out there in the same vein as the stuff you love and see what happens.
That is such a good advice. And I don't think anybody has put it from this perspective so well. Because a lot of people said, it's beautiful, but a lot of people say, I wrote the book because I couldn't find this and the stuff that I was looking for. But nobody actually gives anybody the advice to say, go ahead and do that book because that's what other people are needing.
Yeah, most people just need a push, right? I mean, they want to write, but they just need a little shove. So start. What's the worst thing that can happen? It took me 30 years, right? So I guess it'd be 31 years. That would be the worst.
That's pretty much it. That's what else do you have to lose?
Right.
As a reader, what are the books that you enjoy that have made an impact in your career and your life?
Yeah, I always go back to a couple authors, William Kennedy, John Irving, and Richard Russo. When I was a senior in high school, John Irving's The Hotel New Hampshire came out. And I remember it came out in Rolling Stone. It was serialized. And my sister and I used to fight over, because I used to subscribe to Rolling Stone. We used to fight over it because we couldn't wait to read the next chunk of John Irving's new novel. And I never read Irving before. And for that Christmas, my sister bought me a copy of the book. And when I finished reading it, I remember closing the book thinking, I want to write a book like that. I love to write a book that makes you laugh until you realize how sad it is, which I think is something that Irving's brilliant at. Kennedy and Richard Russo, I was attracted to because of their sense of place in their writing. Kennedy had the Albany trilogy, Legs Diamond, Billy Phelan's Greatest Game, and Ironweed, won the Pulitzer. Those are all based in Albany, New York. And I love the way how he centered it around Albany, which you don't think of when you think of fiction, right? It's not like LA or New York. And he created that whole world. And I really love that. And I'm trying to do the same thing for Buffalo, what Kennedy did for Albany. And same thing with Richard Russo. He had, especially in his early work, he had that strong sense of place in Mohawk and all those more earlier mid-career novels. And I was just drawn to them. Those are the ones that really made the impact, those authors.
Oof, those are great examples. And the fact that you have pieces of each of them that you love, pieces of the things that they created in their career, and you can relate to that feeling that you had and how you bring them back to your reader. So I really appreciate it. What are you working on now? Let's talk about that.
Well, it's funny. During the pandemic, I was locked down in a big house with a little one-eyed dog. A lot of my friends who are writers or visual artists, they couldn't create during the pandemic because it was just so awful and scary. They just couldn't get the creative juices flowing because there were so many distractions, awful distractions. I was the opposite. You read to escape. I wrote to escape. I turned off Netflix and I said, I want to write a world that's pure escapism where I'm in control. So I created a detective named Nicholas Bishop, who has a little one-eyed dog. He's an alcoholic. He's a private investigator in Buffalo in 1942. And he wakes up on the floor of this hotel room after a 5-day drinking binge. And he can't remember anything except 2 bullets have been fired from his gun, and the police want to talk to him. And so I wrote this just as I remember blogging about it, saying, I don't know if this book will ever be published. I'm just writing this for me to get away from COVID and to have something to do. And so I wrote this noir detective novel. And like I said, I didn't think anyone would want to publish it. I showed it to my friend, Carla Dameron. She has a wonderful new book out called The Orchid Tattoo. And she read it. And the first thing she asked was, well, is this a series? And I said, oh, no, it's a standalone. Wrote it during COVID. Showed it to my friend Ashley Warlick, who wrote the arrangement. And the first thing she asked me, well, is this a series? And I said, one off, standalone, wrote it during the pandemic, showed it to my publisher. He said, well, is this a series? Because I think Netflix would really be interested in something like this. And I said, yes, it's absolutely a series. No idea about any other books that would come after this one. So right now, that first detective novel is called After Pearl. That's coming out in 2025. And I'm working on the second installment of the Nicholas Bishop series. And that one has a working title of The Falling Woman. So it's good stuff. It's fun, but I didn't think I would be doing this.
I am so excited. The fact that you're like, why not? It is a series now. We're going to make it happen.
Yeah, I'll come up with something.
Everybody's asking for it. We'll make it happen. This is definitely going to work out. I love it.
So fingers crossed. Yeah.
Oh, it's coming. You already have a title. It's coming. So congratulations. I'm so excited.
Thanks.
I love the fact that you're playing different genres and you don't mind experimenting, exploring. How comfortable do you feel with that? Or is it something that just randomly comes?
You know, I think it goes back to what I said earlier. My advice to writers starting out. I mean, I read different things. I mean, I just read a Dashiell Hammett novella that I had laying around the house for about 30 years that I just finally picked up one day and read. I love literary fiction and I'll read that. And so it just depends on my mood. Like I read different things depending on my mood. I write different genres and based on how I feel at that particular moment in time. And I've learned over the years just to trust my gut, just to go with it. If it doesn't work out, you know, stick it in a drawer. You may come back to it and just move on to something else. But I've learned to really listen to that inner writer voice over all these years. And I'm just more trusting of myself and the muse or whatever's guiding me.
Ooh, I love it. That's such a good way of looking at things. So, dear, tell me, where can our listeners find your book when they can learn more about you? Where are you located?
Yeah, you can go to my website, which is SG and my last name, EoAnnou.com. And all the books are there that you can order and pre-order. You can pre-order Yesteryear at your favorite bookstore or at your favorite places online. I always tell people to go to their favorite indie bookstore in town and have them pre-order it for you. And that helps everybody out. But Yesteryear will be out October 3rd. And so we're really excited to bring the Lone Ranger and Franz Stryker's story out to the world.
So to our listeners, so go get it because this is absolutely amazing and exciting. So dear, before you leave us, are you ready for the lightning round?
I'm ready. Bring it.
Super easy. Let's see how you do. Spicy foods or sweet?
Sweet.
Nice. Hotels or camping?
Hotels.
Me too. So trust me. DC or Marvel?
Neither.
Really? Okay. Planes or boats?
That's a tough one. I'm going to say train and screw you up.
Why not? We're in a road. Mm-hmm. So here's a little different. Let's see how you do this. Well, this might be easy for you. So let's try this. If the main character of your book had a theme song, what would it be?
I would say, because he's alcoholic, in this one at least, it would be Midnight Cocktail, I believe is the name of the song, by Glenn Miller.
Ooh, very nice.
Yeah, you didn't see that one coming.
Not at all. Not even close. I was like, what? Dear, it has been such a pleasure having you. Congratulations on the new book. Happy dance for you. Do you have any closing remarks for us?
No, just thanks for having me on and thanks for what you do promoting authors. We truly appreciate it.
It is always a pleasure. Absolutely a blast. To our listeners, pick up this book. You are going to love it. Check out the website and all the fun things that Mrs. Stephen has going on. If you're still new for the podcast and you have not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe now. You don't want to miss a single episode. We have new authors coming back every Monday. And until next week, everyone, have an amazing week. Bye.